Creative Camp Podcast. This is episode 5, and I'm really excited to introduce our cast today. So we have, as usual, Mark and Guy, and joining us, our youngest cast member so far, we have Ethan Evans. And Ethan, how long have you been counseling with us? Or just working with us?
I've only been working 2, but I've been a camper since I was 4. I've been here a long time.
Yeah.
You have camper center for?
We have some day campers.
Really day camp.
So just our wee tots. You were in one of my day camp cabins, I believe.
Yeah, that's where you led me to Christ and then forgot about it.
Okay. Yes, that is a story.
We should save that for the favorite stories.
We can save that for the favorite stories. Yeah, that's right.
Heck yeah.
That is a fun story. I didn't even think about it this time. You're the one who brought it up. So, anyways, yes, so we have a great episode today. We're going to be talking about what makes a good cabin. And it is my belief, and I think it's everyone's belief here, that the camp really shines with its counselors. It really shines with the staff that is put together to minister to the campers. Because, like we've talked about in some of the episodes past, like, facilities are nice, but facilities are secondary to a good trained staff. Mm-hmm. And so anyways, we're going to talk about some of our favorite, our cabin stuff, ways that we, as counselors, because all of us have counseled, right?
Yeah.
I counseled back from the 2009 to 2014 era, something like that. And then you counseled a little bit prior to that, all the way up to 2014. So a bit more time than me to figure off, though. You were in Korea one time.
You were, 2018, I was 2019?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Guy got instant promoted to, after 1 year counseling. We liked him so much. And then he joined full time, and then he was the head counselor. And then Ethan did 1 year of junior counseling.
It would have been 2, but...
Yeah.
Yes, would have been 2, but... Coronavirus. But... You were also a camper for many, many years, so you can kind of speak to also some good camp experiences versus some bad camp experiences. But anyways, let's jump into it, and then I cannot wait for us to talk about the activity later. So, I sent you guys the email about some questions, so we're going to leap into the first topic we're talking about, in cabin identity. For those of you who don't know, Camp Grace actually has a numbered cabin system. We have cabins 1 through 6 on the girls' side. We don't talk about 7 and 8. Then we have cabins 9 through 14 on the boys' side. And 11 through 14 are camper cabins, and 1 through 5 on the girls' side are camper cabins.
Fun fact, 11 through 14 used to be 1 through 4. And then
Yes.
It's a little complicated.
A1, A2. Mark was always an A1.
Wasn't 14 the office?
And yes, cabin 14 was the office for a long time. But he had the steak sauce cabin, and his sign was that, right? And then I was usually an A2, which was A2. And then that completely changed, and they just added 1s before everything.
Yeah.
And on the other side. And the reason we don't talk about cabin 7 and 8 is because the original plan had the cabins wrapping around this way, but then we abandoned that plan. And so now 7 and 8 will never exist until we completely rename the cabins. There needs to be a story behind the missing 7 and 8. There needs to be something there.
Just make something got a hurricane.
Oh, yeah.
It was there.
It swept away in Hurricane Matthew. Or Florence was much worse. For everyone else.
It should just be a random hurricane that didn't really...
That's right.
Or hurricane before.
Hurricane Xavier. The one that Catfish brought it upon. But anyway, so yeah, the great thing about these numbered cabins is that sometimes when we have counselors that come for multiple years, they end up getting or requesting the same cabin for multiple years. So in our generation, we had Priscilla, who was in cabin 5 for multiple summers. Mm-hmm. There was me, I was in cabin 12 for multiple summers. Mark was in cabin 11, and then he took like a quick 13 stint for a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. For multiple summers.
Because I was a hybrid.
That's right. Yes, he was
program/counselor. Mm-hmm. Pretty much do whatever I tell you to do from Mr. Brent.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Summer.
Guy, well, you were
cabin 11.
You were cabin 11, and since
I've only been a JC, so I just did all 4 over and over.
Yes, junior counselors don't get to stay in one cabin; they hop cabins every week. But it's really fun because there's like these identities. Like Michael was in cabin 13 for a long time, and they kind of take their own personas and identities. And so all of us are trying to fight to see which cabin Ethan would be in. I know what cabin Ethan needs to be in.
I want 12 so bad. I want 12.
Because so after I was done counseling, cabin 12 went to Sam Jo. And then you briefly talk about Sam Jo because you had and your friend group had a lot of fun experiences with Sam.
Yeah, like you mentioned earlier how friend groups and like some campers will constantly request the same counselor. My friend group grew up through you initially. You got out of counseling and became full-time, and then Sam Jo took over 12, and we just happened to get him that first summer. And after that, we like attached to him so hard, and we requested him every year after that. And like when we found out he was a head counselor, I think in 17 or 18, we were so bummed out because we didn't know where else to go. And then we ended up getting 17. Then we ended up leaving 12 and going to 14, 13. But Sam was so good at just making that cabin identity like you're talking about. Like he made like the group want to work as a cabin and like go out and help everybody. Like try to get honor cabin, which we never ended up doing, which so bothers me to this day. We had a good cabin every summer. We never ended up winning because there was always that one other cabin that would compete with us, and we had never won against them.
Have you ever won honor cabin?
I won last summer.
You did? Congratulations. When Sam first started working for us, I can say this is with all love because Sam is an incredible man now. Incredible. I would trust him with my life. He's getting married next month to an amazing woman. He's very much part of our Camp Grace legacy. People still talk about Mr. Sam. But when he first came here, oh my goodness, that boy had so much growing up to do. Sam, I hope you get to watch this. There was one time when Sam, you know how that hour leading up to campers coming is very hectic. You're getting your shirts, you're trying to memorize all the campers' names, you're cleaning, all of that stuff. And Sam would always come up to me, he's like, "Can you help me make my bed?" And so I would help Sam make his bed. And then I had the privilege of having Sam while he was sick with his little brother.
I remember that.
Who also got sick. And so there's Sam like draped with like a blanket and his hot tea. And then right next to him is his brother, also draped in a blanket with his hot tea. And I'm like, oh my goodness, there's two of them. But no, Sam then went on to take Cabin 12, and I dare say do a much better job at Cabin 12 than I ever did, because he made that identity so unique and so much fun to be in that you had campers, not just your group, but bunches of campers who ever went under his counselorship, who always requested him and always wanted to be in his cabin. So, but I want to hear from you guys. I've done enough talking. I want to hear how you guys in your individual cabins, either experiencing it as a camper or actually making the culture or the identity in the cabin. Like, how did you accomplish that, and how were you able to get your campers to like mesh together and for them to be really proud of, I'm part of Cabin 11, I'm part of Cabin 13, I'm part of Cabin 14, and things like that.
Well, we had kind of an odd way of doing things the year that I was counseling, just because of the dynamic of Dennis.
Yes, tell us about 12 and
12 and 12 and, yes. Cabins 11 and 12. I was definitely the chill person, just the one that did not like a lot of noise, but I tried to be fun. But Dennis would always top me, like you can't outfun Dennis. And so we tried our best to have some sort of fluidity between cabins where all you have to do is ask, and unless there's like a serious time or anything like that, you can go to Cabin 12 and people from Cabin 12 can come to 11. I didn't know half the people in my cabin on the first night because half of them were from Cabin 12. I got to know them though, but if they wanted to come hang out and talk for a while, play some Uno or something like that, and just relax, then they're more than welcome in my cabin, and then vice versa. So it was kind of like Dennis had set up Gaga Ball every night in his cabin with suitcases and things like that, and so that's just the way we created a space that, if kids just want to be away from something, like all the big noise and crowds, or if they wanted to be a part of that whole thing, then they could choose either one. And that allowed us to really, bond with the particular kids that may not relate to Dennis as much. They may not, want to be on 10 all the time. And then vice versa, the people that want that energy usually talk to Dennis. We had a lot of experience with people from the other cabin that we've had great long talks and just shared the gospel just because they wanted to move from one cabin to the other. So
yeah, it's really interesting because when I was in cabin 12, Mark was usually in cabin 11, and there was that quiet, it wasn't really a rivalry, but there was, and so when I first heard that cabin 12 was becoming a thing, I resisted that wholeheartedly in my heart, because I'm the cabin 12 poster boy at camp, and we all have our favorite cabins because we grew up in them, right? Not actually our favorite, but if they take a group picture, I'll try to hop in with 12, things like that. But they really had some fun. They taped things to their face one time. I'm sure that was Dennis. that did that, and it was really fun to see. Now, did cabin 11 or cabin 12 ever win honor cabin that summer?
Yeah, we won it. Both of us won once.
Okay.
Yeah. So I won the first elementary week. That one.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think Dennis finally won his teen week.
This was Survivor, right?
Yeah, this was the Survivor.
Got it. Okay. Could you, or whoever wants to, briefly explain what honor cabin is?
Honor cabin is what is it? You get a plaque at the end, and it what is it? Just there's a bunch of things that go into it. The full-time staff are watching campers to see who's kind of the best behaved, and who, cabins that are meshing together really well, just kind of that good group dynamic. You see them enjoying the activities. Cabin cleanup kind of goes into it a little bit, and just different things, but it's mainly the cabin that kind of rises above the rest, that really enjoys that week, and is really they're getting into the messages, they're asking the questions, they're bonding with their counselors and learning a lot. And so that's what we're kind of looking for in honor cabin. And at the end of the week, we'll give them this wooden plaque that they're able to sign and decorate, and then we hang it up in that cabin. So you can go in and see the different plaques in there. Unfortunately, they did not have honor cabin during our time.
But at least won once. I know one twice. I know two cabins that would have absolutely murdered it in the competition.
We did have some sort of competitions, because I remember the first time you were a junior counselor, it was the siblings week, and you were really hardcore about that.
Yeah, I remember once we had Chrissy and Jory, who were siblings, sisters, and then Elizabeth and Priscilla in another, and then Mark and I. And it was fun because, that was fun because then that's where the nicknames the King and Queen of Cabin Clean came up, and that was Queen versus King at that point. That was Elizabeth and Priscilla, who were both amazing at it, versus Mark and I, who we were raised by Cheetah Martins. So
good luck.
Yeah, it was a well fought battle though. It was very hard, but there was no honor cabin back then, but I feel like we were more competitive than some of the counselors now can be. But I wanted to ask, so Ethan, with you hopping around junior counselors, without naming any names, were you ever in a cabin where it just felt like there was no identity, or it was just you just kind of existed as part of this big camp conglomerate, and then your campers necessarily didn't want to be in the cabin or preferred to be somewhere else, or this night times were awkward, and how do you think you could have prevented that?
The only case that I can think of when I was counseling that happened to was the 1 week when we didn't have those night times. I was day camp, and that's because they're little kids. They never want to sit still too long. It's hard to get them all in one place and sit down and talk long enough to form an identity when all they want to do is run around and play with the kids from other cabins, because their friend groups will be in different cabins. They'll know maybe one other kid at camp, and it'll be in cabin 13 and we're in 11 or something, and they'll just go over there whenever, and it's not very hard to form an identity in day camp when all they want to do is just play constantly, which is understandable. They're 5 to 7.
Yeah.
It's hard to get them down to sit down and talk and stuff like that. But Other than that, I feel like we formed a pretty good, like, almost a tight-knit bond in every other week that I was there, because I wasn't there for elementary week either. So I didn't have to deal with the little kids. I think the youngest I dealt with was, like, 11. So after that, I was able to form a really close bond with, like, just about every kid I had because of that.
Yeah. I think when it comes to day camp, one of the best examples I ever saw of anyone building like a day camp like identity in a cabin was all the way back when Luke Guilford had to step in for a sick counselor. And so he didn't even have them day one. I think he started day 2 and just stayed for the rest of the week. And first of all, he had little sisters, so he had a lot of practice. And he did this thing where every single time they would go outside, they would go bear hunting. And he came up with the most creative and cool ways to keep that group together chaotically. It was so cool to watch him. And he was able to quiet his cabin. And he had like the youngest ones. He had like the 5-year-olds. But also, if I can just comment on the culture, I feel like as we progress in culture, the more independent our day campers become, so they are stronger-willed, stronger personality, it seems like. Because I remember when I was having day campers, they were just excited to be there and they'll follow you wherever you go. But nowadays, they just seem like they're already like getting off into their friend groups and not listening to you and being rebellious. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're 6 years old. It's kind of crazy. Like this last day camp was one of the toughest day camps I've ever seen of counselors having to deal with that. You were head counseling. Do you like what was up with that week of day camp?
That explains it. I think it pretty much sums it up.
Yeah, I think it was it Tom was 14, right, for a little bit during that time. Yeah, I remember he came up to me and said, "Listen, I'm gonna need to sit down in your bed. Just give me 10 minutes. Can you please just go over to cabin 14?" And I walk in cabin 14, and all the beds are off their bunks. These are 5 to 7-year-olds,
Right.
And they got these beds like completely off. They've built a fort. Fortnite.
Right.
It's coming in my head. They built this whole fort. And so, and they were just acting wild, and I think it was just up to their imagination. I believe it was some sort of castle thing, and they were trying to be at the top of the castle, and so they were just tackling each other. Thankfully on mats, that they pulled off the bed, which is fine. But yeah, it was just. I just think if we go back to like last week's podcast and talking about technology and things like that, where. It's people are just glued to their phones all the time. Even as 5 to 7-year-olds, they probably know how to work some apps better than I could. Like I don't think I could work the YouTube app, just in general. But I don't know. My 7-year-old cousin knows how to work a smartphone in and out. Yeah. And so I just think it's that level of instant gratification that is starting to cause people already in friend groups because these 5 or 7-year-olds are already playing Fortnite. Yeah. Right. And things like that. So they're already in like this group concept of gaming, and they have some idea of what they love to do. And so that's why I think that's starting to happen.
Yeah, especially in downtime, the kids are very, I'm bored, It's like, no, you really should take a nap because you're going to be dying in 4 hours during the mission story. I mean, like, day camp, there's, like, half of them are asleep during the mission story because it's a packed day. And so that 1 hour of rest is a really good time for rest. And we always encourage take this time to be able to go over Bible verses. I remember having, like, Gabe Hall in my cabin. And he would always come in prepared to say his Bible verse, and people names like Landon Buck, and I don't remember his name, but I had this one camper. The only thing I remember is his hair was cut short and he had a very defined widow's peak, like such a defined widow's peak, and he was a lot of fun. He was one of the cleaner campers, day campers. He always liked to stick near me, and these kids just have no chill. We were at the waterfront one day, and he just walks up to me. He's like, Mr. Timmy, and I'm like, hey, what's up? And then he just makes this weird face, like, And then he just announces, I just peed. I'm like, oh, great. Standing right next to you. Okay. Yeah, that's the kind of campers that you have with day camp. There's no chill. Super, like, wanting to have fun every second. When they are having fun, then they're not listening to you. Or they're very particular. Or like, oh, it's too bright. Oh, I don't want to run, but I want to have fun. Day camp is a very difficult week. To have identity. But flip that around and then you have your overnight weeks of camp where you do have more time. Tell me then about some of like your favorite cabin experiences that you can remember. And like how did the counselor build out that cabin identity and how did they make it something really special?
I think one of the best examples I can think of off the top of my head, and that's because it was recent, was Team 2 when I was with Jared. That night after chapel, we all just sat down and we were like, okay, what do we want to accomplish this week? Like, what's our goal? It's like, if we don't have a goal, then there's no point. Mm-hmm. And I think all 4 of them simultaneously said get honor cabin, because one of them is a first year camper, he didn't even know what that was. And all of them were like, let's get honor cabin, let's just do it. And I was like, okay, let's do this. Like, I didn't even know what we were doing, and I was like, let's go for it. And then I brought up that idea, Sam talked to me about it one time when he had little kids, this whole idea of being a gentleman or whatever, and how all of his little kids would end up letting the girls go first, little things like that, and it was cute because they were little. And I was like, guys, let's just do it really aggressively. So let's just run to every table during meals, we'll grab all their dishes and we'll take it for them. Like little things like that, but we'll make it funny. The entire week. And there was like 5 of us. So we just did it. We did it the entire week to the point where every cabin got fed up with us because they wanted to do it themselves and like stop. Like at one point, I caught one of my campers. I think he snatched dishes from one of the girl JCs, and I was like, "Hey, I like the enthusiasm." No, and he said sorry, and then he took them anyways. And like we did that the entire weekend. We ended up winning honor cabin because of that little group of identity that we had. And it was probably one of the best weeks of campus I ever had. But I think another thing that's really good to do is after chapel, sit down with your cabin and just talk. Because I can't think of a single time where I was, as a JC and even as a camper, where the counselor would just have a sit down and we just talk about little things like ground rules, of course, but other things like what do we want to do this week? What's our overall goal? Things like that really help form an identity in the cabin.
Yeah. Just kind of going back to the identity. Well, because the memories come with it, but identity really starts with the senior counselor. Like the senior counselor sets the tone for the identity, and if you don't have a game plan, you're just like, oh, we're just going to kind of wing it this week. It's just going to be chaotic and just a mess. And so it's good, like that first night, to sit your guys down and be like, hey guys, here are the rules, this is what we expect in the cabin, yada yada yada, this is how this week's going to go. And then it's different for everyone. Like Sam's cabin was a bit more upbeat, I was a little more chill, relaxed, be like, hey, you guys just make sure you follow the rules and we'll have a good time, tell me what you guys want to do, and we'll do. Like one of my favorite things to do was, as a counselor, if I saw that I was having a pretty good cabin, was to take them out on like night hikes, and then you can just be like, hey guys, look at the stars, and talk to them about God and creation and different things like that. And it's just, some of my favorite memories were having those conversations with the campers, whether it's one-on-ones or like Ethan was saying, those conversations after chapel, being like, hey, let's dig into what the speaker was talking about. So like, especially the teen weeks where the guys were really focused in, they just had all these questions. And sometimes I'd have to be like, guys, I don't know the answer to that. I need to get back to you, but let me do some research. These are really good questions and all that. But that's just my favorite thing about camp, is just being able to pour into the campers that come in and share with them about God and his love and all that. So, but yeah, identity really falls back onto the counselors and having them just lead throughout the week. So,
and I think for my cabin, there was one particular week that stood out. Team week 2 had, I think, 6 boys. We had 6 boys. They were I think the laziest group of people I've ever met in my life, but that comes with its pros too. And so, like I remember some of the cons is when we woke up at 7 o'clock in the morning, like no teenager wants to do. Sam Joe came in and just started yelling, singing, shaking the bed, and I had a piano in there that I brought in just for fun, or keyboard, I should say, and I played that obnoxiously, and after about 20 minutes, one kid would just pop his head up and just be like, "I'm awake," and the other 5 were still sleeping. But like we did all this, like they were pretty active throughout the day, but like during cabin rest time, they all just sat and they actually rested. And then they're just like, all right, it's time for activity time. And they're just like, can it wait 5 minutes? But with all that, it was a group of guys that, since they wanted to rest all the time, they were always just with each other. They were always talking. And then, when I got in there and my JC, I can't remember who it was that week, but when we get to talking, we can, start sharing the gospel. We can start talking about these things that are on their minds that they don't necessarily have an answer to. And it just sparked such good conversation all week, because they didn't want to be outside in their cabin. They loved just playing, hanging out and talking, and that turned out to be just one of the best weeks of discipleship that I had as a counselor.
Yeah. I absolutely loved the time after chapel as a counselor. We would always have our mandatory circle meetings. Like brush your teeth and then join the circle, or however we did it. We tried to get it ready for bed, then have our circle meeting. Then we would, have fun until it was lights out. And sometimes the circle meetings had to take place immediately after chapel, though, because you had one of those chapels where the chapel speaker was just like hammering his point home, or her point home, and it's like, okay, we need to talk about this immediately, right? We need to get together and have a circle time. And some of the best memories I have are from those moments, or after those moments where after the circle meeting, then you could take a camper onto the front porch or into a well-lit area and have a one-on-one time with them. Like one of those times was with Adam Lowry. He didn't say a word. He was so shy back then. But there was a heat lightning storm that evening, and I remember just since it was expected at the very beginning, because on Sunday, and we're going to talk about Sunday night here in a second. Because on Sunday night, it was kind of the expectation was made clear about what we were doing, where we were going, what was important, and what I always wanted to do with my cabin culture was make sure that our spiritual growth was the most important thing. Everything else was secondary, and that's why I also followed up with, so there's going to be a time where me or the junior counselor is going to talk to you. And that was just those times where when they're expecting it, they're already, like for me, they were already ready to ask questions. They were so ready to be like, okay, I learned this in chapel. And some of them were really uncomfortable. Some of them didn't know what to say, didn't know what to talk about. And, I would try to lead the conversation, but some of them had some like the best conversations. And those individual conversations then also lead to a more meshed group, because if you're a counselor and you don't have relationship with each of your campers, if you only have that group relationship, it's not as strong as when they're able to also connect to you individually as well. But so let's talk about then the most important part about establishing that identity. And as Miss Karen would say, that is established on Sunday night. So like, what would you say are the most important things on that first meeting, or that first day, that first 12 hours that you're with them? What are the most important things for you to establish, and so that way you can build that identity? What are some rules? What are some things that you shouldn't make rules? I'm just curious about how you guys really set that up in the beginning.
Well, of course you don't really need to go over the camp rules, because I've kind of already heard that in orientation. I would always kind of emphasize some of them, like no purple, stuff like that, especially if it was teen week. But you just want to kind of establish like cabin rules. Like you don't want to make it too strict, but just like, hey, like when lights are out, it's time to go to bed because you guys want to be well rested for the next day. And then also letting them know, like you were saying, hey, me or the junior counselor are going to be getting with you during the week just to have a conversation, so that they can be thinking about that, and just kind of just giving kind of some organization to some structure to what can sometimes be chaotic.
Yeah.
Because you don't want it just to be so structured, because then that can just kind of get boring and all that. You kind of want there to be some spontaneity, different things like that, just so it's fun. But just getting that established the first night, because if you don't hit that hard the first night, like the weeks I didn't hit that very hard, and if I wasn't like feeling good or something like that, but if I didn't establish that really well that first night, I knew it was going to be a rough week.
Yeah, I think one thing I learned from Dustin when I was his junior counselor way back in the day, like 2010, was if you have a lot of rules, it's a lot easier for your campers to break them. And so he's like, just keep it simple. Some things that bother, like, I used to have a counselor who would make this rule of like no wet towels on the bed. And like that makes sense. It's a good rule. But he, like, his campers would always forget, and then he would actually give out like legit punishments for it. And but then Dustin was always just like, just go hang it up. Just go put it on the line for them. Like, there's no need for it to be every little thing doesn't have to be a teaching experience. And so like our culture here is like there's two main goals of camp, and it's to teach children about Christ and for them to have fun, for them to have real good fun. That's safe, and
Which is why you have rules,
right? And that's why you have rules, so that way there's that study where if you have a group of children and you have an open field and you tell them to go out and play, they'll only explore so much of that field. But if you fence in the field and you tell them to go out and play, they'll explore to the fringes of the fence. And so children tend to explore more or have more freedom when they have clear boundaries. But you don't want those boundaries to be tight. You want them to encompass the whole field, right? So I remember that was a big, profound rule, a thing that I learned from Dustin. And Dustin still had his rules. Like, the inside of his cabin was still a sanctuary. He's like, this is the place where we're going to be calm. If you want to do something like crazy or boisterous, go outside. That was never Dennis's rule, though, right? Never Dennis's rule. But just having those simple rules that were easy to keep really helped us be able to manage, because we don't want to be managers. We want to be counselors, and we want to have a lot of fun with the students. Man, if I could go back in time, I think it would be a lot of fun just to be like 1 week or 2 weeks again as a counselor. What about y'all on your Sunday nights?
I think Sunday nights are important, but like I think you're sleeping on one of the other like really important times, day one. That's the swim test, like pre-swim test talks. Because like I didn't get to do it very often because I was a lifeguard, and I oftentimes have to do the swim test. But like, especially if you're a guy cabin, you're sitting there for what feels like an hour and a half waiting for the swim test to go through, and it's obviously not that long, but it feels like it.
That's
like
not long.
It's about an hour, yeah.
Yeah. Like you get to camp, you're all excited, you pack up all your things, and all of a sudden you're waiting an hour to go swim. Like it's like those talks, especially when I wasn't on swim test duty, those talks were like I finally got to understand. I can get to meet the campers, get to know them before that Sunday night talk.
Yeah.
And that Sunday night talk, you have to like. In every cabin I had, the one thing that was established almost immediately was, yeah, guys, we're here to have fun, but like you're here to learn before that. And I think the only like really rule that I can think of off the top of my head that like sticks out to me is Tom's rule of, if anyone other than Ethan is on my bed, I will push you out myself.
Oh, see, that was never me.
I had multiple times where, like, especially Team Week 2, when I was like just those 5 guys, where I would lay on my bed and all of a sudden one of them's at the foot of my bed, and we end up talking till like 1, 2 a.m. unintentionally. Just talk. I really was unintentional. We would just talk forever.
You're open.
And then like. Never mind, I don't remember. We were up just talking, and all of a sudden I look at my clock and I'm like, oh crap, we could be up in like 5 hours.
Yeah, that was never me. And that was back in the day when we had like a lot of us had. I don't think you did, but I had a queen in my cabin.
No, I had a double.
And I think 13 had a queen.
Twin. Yeah. It was like every other cabin, so it was like 11.
The 14 and 12
13.
did, had the big beds. And for me, I know some senior counselors were super persnickety about it, but for me, I'd be like children. And then there would be like 3 or 4 of us, like every night. And they would just sit on the bed, and we would just chill, and we would sometimes play cards together. There were the times when I stuck my DS in, and we would play Nintendo DS together. Oh yeah, I was the worst. I was the worst and best at breaking rules like that. We would have snacks, also against the rules. And
the rules.
you're not supposed to have open food in the cabin.
We go over this in training.
We go over this every year, Ethan.
We definitely had Pop-Tart parties. Like, every 2 months.
And here's the thing, we never would say anything about it, just to make sure there's no bugs in the cabin. You know, so, like, but, like, so that was never me with, like, the whole, and most of my junior counselors were never that way. I remember one time, I was in a cabin, this is like, oh my goodness, Zach, I forget his last name, Chandler was in it.
Zach Davis.
Zach Davis. Zach Davis, Chandler McKenzie, Josh Lowry, and oh man, there were 2 Chandlers. There was another Chandler. Anyways, Thursday night, I'm just like, okay, guys, we're gonna have lights out but no bedtime. We're gonna have fun all night. It was getting to be like around midnight, and like, I fell asleep, and then I woke up, and I look over, and this is like a full week too. All right, and I look over. And for the folks at home, by the way, like when we're talking about like campers and beds and stuff, we make them sleep in their own beds. Like that's a rule and policy. This is like when we're just hanging out. But anyways, so I woke up and I look over to Paul, my junior counselor, and he has like all 10 kids in his single bed. And I don't know what they're talking about. I mean, they're just having fun. They're laughing over there. Like, I don't know how they crammed everyone into that single bed. But I remember just looking over them like, all right, and I went to bed. And that cabin, like I'll still like whenever Josh was around or whenever Chandler or whatever, we'd still sometimes be like, yeah, that was a lot of fun. Josh would still bring up some of the fun things that we did during that week. And that's the goal, I think. Because if you can associate your fondest memories with a time of spiritual growth, you can always be then reminded of the things that you learned that week. You can always be reminded of, yeah, that's right. That counselor, like Mr. Guy, Mr. Ethan, Mr. Mark, they really, really helped me grow in my spiritual walk. So, but yeah, so I think we're basically out of time to talk about this anymore. You'll have to tell your story another time. About how I forgot that. Anyways, what I want to do is, so we talk about a game, an activity every session. And so last week we talked about God's Movies. The week before that we talked about Gaga Ball. This week since we're talking about cabin identity and small group games, we're going to talk about Mafia. Now, I wanted to talk about Mafia because recently, I don't know if you've seen just the smashing success of
Among Us.
Among Us, thank you. And it is a Mafia-esque game that takes place on a mobile device or a computer, where you have someone who's an imposter, and you have to figure out who the imposter is, but all of that root comes from
Mafia.
This game called Mafia. So, Mark, Mr. Program Director, why don't you briefly explain to us how to play Mafia?
Mafia, what is it? I guess sometimes, no, you don't need cards, but sometimes sometimes people would assign identities, like Mafia members were like hearts or something like that, or and you would pass out cards, or you could also just be like, if I tap you on the shoulder while your head's down.
Mm-hmm.
But
First, it's really easy to use a broomstick when you're in like a circle and you just like, you are Mafia.
But I'm jumping ahead of myself, but most of the time with the person, the narrator would come up with like a city name, like this, for me I'd be like the city of steak sauce because I was A1. And so then you appoint, depending on how many campers or how many people you appoint, like maybe 1, 2, 3 Mafia. Well, more than one, because if they get found out, then the game ends pretty soon. But at least 2 are the Mafia. And then you have a sheriff and a doctor.
And sheriff is optional.
Yeah. And then there's a bunch of like other people you can add to that just make the game more complicated and crazy. But those are the ones that you need to do the game. So what happens is you tell the town of Steak Sauce to go to sleep, and then you choose your people. You're like, okay, these are the Mafia. Look at who you are, so you know. This is, okay, go back to sleep. Doctor, raise your head, you're the doctor, blah, blah, blah. And then sheriff, yada, yada. And then you put everybody to sleep. Then you wake the Mafia up, and they choose somebody to eliminate from the game. And then they go to sleep. And then the doctor wakes up, chooses to save somebody. If they save the person that the Mafia were trying to eliminate, they're not taken out of the game. And then the sheriff can wake up and point to somebody to see if they're Mafia or not, and you tell them if they are. But they can't, like, outright during the town hall meetings be like, they're Mafia because the narrator told me that they're Mafia.
Yeah, and it's because, like, what we do is...
it's a storytelling aspect.
Yeah, and if... I always make the rule that if the Mafia is able to identify who the sheriff is at the end, then you lose. Like, the Mafia is still able to win in that way. And so that prevents the sheriff from being super overt about it.
Yeah. So then, what is it? Then everybody wakes up. If a person was eliminated, you make a little story of how they were eliminated, and different things like that.
That's
and
the
then,
best part, too. Yeah.
And then you have town hall meetings to kind of discuss who you think the Mafia are. And so a lot of times, I would get picked on just because I'm a quiet guy, and they're like, it's Mark, he's always quiet. I'm just like, guys, I'm not the Mafia. Come on.
You have to make up some kind of fake alibi that
Yes.
makes no sense.
Yes.
It's like, where were you last night? I was asleep.
I was taking care of Grandma Mitten's kittens.
But yeah, so like, but while everyone's asleep, so you're kind of like, your eyes are closed, but you're trying to keep aware of your surroundings to see, oh, I think I heard this person like kind of rustle. So like,
Whenever you go for Mafia.
Yeah, whenever you call for the Mafia to wake up, you're just like, okay, I'm holding still, so I'm not moving, so like, no one knows, and different things like that.
And then during deliberations, you can be like, you have been really aggressive towards Jared. Why? You know? Or why are you trying to get Jared? Are you the sheriff? You know? Stuff like that. So many games have come from this game. Like, there is The Resistance, there is Murder in the Dark, whereas basically a live retelling of that one.
What is it? One Night Werewolf?
Yeah, One Night Werewolf. There's another one, the one that we play at the Priest Farm. Oh, it's like, you have the clues and then...
Clue?
No, not Clue. But it's like, it's the rock and the clue that they left behind. I can't remember what it's called, but it's so much fun. And again, it's like where there's a murderer, and then there's like someone who's helping them, an accomplice, and then there's investigators. Oh, I mean, there's so many fun retellings of this game, but all camps, I feel like, have been playing this game for years. And so, like, you guys
have to keep it a little PG.
Yeah, keeping it PG with the kids. We always came up with, like, no one dies, you know. Oftentimes, just people get really hurt. Like, you know, they slip and fall on a banana, you know. Or, you know, they went swimming with the alligators, but, you know, they got tickled to death or something. You know, just, you know, just
stuck
crazy.
in the toilet or something.
Yeah. There's ways to make it camp appropriate, so that way no one ever accuses being camp inappropriate. But... So, do you guys have any stories of any fun Mafia games?
So, like I said, I was in Sam Joe's cabin for 4 years straight. And that man is the best storyteller you will ever meet. So he was able to make these situations that were so creative and, like, mind-boggling that you're, like, really invested in it. There was one game, I think it was I don't remember what year it was, where the entire time, no one understood what was going on. We understood the story part, but no one knew who anyone was. It was the most complicated game ever. I got out about halfway through, and when you get out, normally you go on your bunk, and you just watch from your bunk, and obviously Dead Man Tell No Tales, so you can't say anything. Well, Sam J.O. goes like, okay, everyone go to sleep. Mafia wake up. No one raises their heads, and it's just him.
Yes.
He's like,
He did that.
Who do you want to
before,
kill?
yeah.
Mafia go to sleep. Doctor, wake up, and it's him again. He saves himself, and then Sheriff, who do you want to investigate? He goes, and the entire time, everyone that was dead was dying laughing. It was the funniest thing ever. And then at the end of the game, we had to go to chapel or something, so the game ended early. And everyone was like, there was like 3 people left, and it was like, who was Mafia? Who was who? I'm so confused, and everyone was just like, go. It was so funny.
Oh man, I remember him doing that once when he was my junior counselor, and that was it's right because it's more for the dead kids, right? Or the kids who aren't playing anymore. They're the ones who are just laughing because if you get eliminated first in a game of Mafia, it's so lame. It's just like
with that, it's the funniest thing ever.
Yeah. And it's really funny though if you're Mafia and you can target like the same person multiple times. So like if Jared Huffman was like just a citizen, you could be like every time. But yeah, so the guy, do you have any Mafia stories?
Not anything unlike that. Sam Joe again would come in just about every night and just play Mafia with I think every group of like every cabin
Makes sense.
in the night. He just played Mafia, and then after Mafia, told a bedtime story, and then he would just move on to the next cabin.
Yes. Oh my goodness. This really makes me miss counseling. Like telling bedtime stories too. Those were some fun times. Yep, I always did purple flowers.
That had to be for another podcast.
Yes, I could take up the entire podcast just on that story plus some. Like if you do the full one, it has to last 5 nights in a row. So, but anyways, so yeah, if you're interested in Mafia, it's a fun game. It's not very fun if there's only like 4 people, but if you do have a group
The
of
more the
like
merrier.
the more the merrier. Very much like Among Us.
And you need a good storyteller.
And a good storyteller, that's right, yeah. Someone who can just be wacky with it, who knows what they're doing, knows how to play very well. And
So Sam Joe, you could probably rent yourself out, whichever camera's still on.
yeah, one of these two.
Rent yourself out and go to people's houses and tell stories, narrate Mafia for them.
Mafia.
I'd pay for that.
Mafia stories, yeah. For my bachelor party, let's just play Mafia all night. I'm kidding. We'll play Among Us all night.
Honestly.
But anyways, well, that's all that we have time for today. Again, if you have any questions or any comments or whatever, be sure to just leave a comment. And yeah, thank you, Ethan, Guy, Mark, for joining us. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Until then, have a good rest of your week.